All right, to start your kumihimo weaving, you're gonna need 7 pieces of yarn. They can be all different colors or repeating colors, it doesn't matter, just 7 pieces of yarn that are the same length. And we want that length to be as long as when we reach our arms out from fingertip to fingertip. So it's a pretty long piece, and they need to all be the same. So the way that I do that is I measure with my arms stretched out for the first one, and then as I cut more, I just hold my next color to my first color and I measure it with that piece of yarn. And then that way, when I am done pulling it towards the end, I can just snip it off and I know it's exactly the same. So once you have 7, you'll just need to, I just messed up my beautiful little pile here. You're gonna need to lay them all so that all the little tails are together. I'm missing my pink here. Where's the pink tail? Here we go. So they're all kind of together and ending in the same spot, and pull them so that they're nice and even and all laying flat together. I need to lift this up to do it. Boop, 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 come here. Okay, so I've got them back flat. They're all together except for this little end guy here. That's the one thing with yarn, is it can get tangled up easily, so you got to be careful of that. One of my white strings snuck away, so we'll put that back with the rest. Okay, now I've got them all together, and I'm going to gather all the ends. I'm going to loop. I'm going to do like a little loop knot. I'm going to loop it, and then I'm going to feed these little loose ends through the loop, hold those little loose ends, and then I'm going to scoot the knot up towards the end of the strings. Make sure that they're all part of that knot though. Make sure none of them snuck back down. So we're just going to give them a little tug, and now you've got a little knot and you're ready to go on to the next step. So the next step, we're going to get a piece of cardboard. This is going to be our loom. We're going to take a pencil, and be careful not to poke yourself. You can draw a little dot in the middle. Kind of find the middle first, and then make sure if you're holding it from the back, you're kind of separating your fingers behind so that when you poke it through, it doesn't poke you. So you're going to poke it with the pencil. Boop, come here, buddy. Poke it and kind of wiggle it through. And I usually go just about to the unsharpened part of the pencil, but not quite all the way, because I find that if I push it all the way through to this part, that hole is a little too big. So I like to keep it a little bit before it slips all the way through. And then we're going to go to the opposite end of where our knot is on our yarn. So I'm going to find the other end where those pieces are gathered, and I'm just going to give it a twist and then keep it tight and give it a fold so that I've got all the 7 strings folded in half and they make like one little nubbin. And then I'm going to push that through that hole, kind of push and wiggle it through so that we can pull it as a group. We want to pull it to the other side. So if that hole is not quite big enough to pull all 7 strings through, you may have to stop and kind of wiggle that pencil a little bit deeper so that that hole opens up a bit more. We're going to pull it all the way through until it stops at our knot. If it pulls through at your knot, pull it back and you can knot it a second time. So you could just do a second loop knot, pull the little tails through, and then before you tie it tight, you kind of want to get that knot to go right on top of your first knot. So you got to kind of tell it where to go. So you got to slowly pull another knot so that it overlaps with the first knot and makes it fatter. So mine went underneath it, but mine's still not pulling through, so I'm okay. But you'd want to kind of put it right on top of that first knot, okay? Now, your next step, you can just let these hang off to the side. We don't need them right this minute. You can mark this if you want, but you don't really have to. You could just eyeball it. I'm gonna mark it so you can see. This cardboard is actually an octagon shape. So at the center of each straight edge of my octagon, I'm just gonna make a tiny little line. So here's a edge. I'm gonna find the middle and I'm making a little tiny line. Just like that. So we're making 8 tiny little marks, one in the middle of each side of our octagon. And cardboard can be a little tricky to cut. So we're going to use scissors, and instead of using the tippy top of the scissors, which are the weakest part of the scissor, we're gonna bring it in all the way to the middle of the scissor, but we just have to be careful not to cut too far. So we're just gonna give it a little tiny cut and stop. We don't want these to be too deep because it'll make the weaving a little bit more difficult for you. So we're just gonna do a little tiny cut and stop, a little tiny cut and stop, little tiny cut, all the way around. All right, this next part, actually let's write my name on the side with the knot. And that way nobody steals all of your hard work once you've started. They say, oh, I like that one, it's more beautiful than mine, I'm gonna take that one instead. That way you've got yours labeled. And then we want the knot on the underside of our cardboard to do this next step. We're gonna take each of the colors, and you can do this in any order you want, it doesn't matter. We're just gonna feed each of these little slots that we cut, we're gonna feed it with the color of our yarn. So you can do it in a certain color pattern, or you can just do it random and see what happens. So each one gets a little a color except for one. So we have 7 yarns, we've got 8 slots, and that's on purpose, don't worry. So now we've got like all these little pieces of yarn down here. We've got our knot underneath, and we've got our Kumihimo loom ready to weave. So this is how you weave. I always keep the open spot with no yarn facing my belly button. So that's when it's always facing me. And then I count 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna reach from underneath and pull that 3rd string up and put it in the empty spot. Then I'm gonna turn my loom. And then I'm gonna count again, 1, 2, 3. Pull it from underneath, put it in the empty spot, and then turn my loom. 1, 2, 3, pull it, put it, turn it. And then every time I do about 3 turns, all these pieces down here are going to get tangled. So I like to do this standing, and then you just have to detangle your little pieces. I don't know how I can do this on the video because I don't have a tall enough camera, but I'm just running my fingers through it to comb out the tangles. And then another thing I do is like every other like maybe every 6 turns, I just give that little knot under here just a gentle little tug so that that weaving starts to build from underneath. And then I continue 1, 2, 3, pull and place and turn. 1, 2, 3, pull, come here, pull, place and turn. I find that if I let these hang as I'm weaving, this does not get nearly as tangled. If I do it on top of a table like I'm doing right here, it gets tangled a lot quicker. So I like to do this standing up and give these a little space to kind of hang down and dangle so that they don't get as twisted. What will happen eventually is your weaving will start to build, and it will start to come through that little hole underneath, and you'll start to see this little woven bit come through. You just want to check on it every once in a while and make sure that you're keeping it underneath the top of the loom and that it doesn't lift up here. We don't want it to be rising up above. We want to keep it down. So that's why we're just giving it a gentle little tug every 6 turns or so.